everybody, my name is Puppetine from the Geeky Puppet Show here on the Geeky Puppet Show today. For what? Sandman here once again. It's our third week, episodes 5 and 6, and we're ready to discuss. Yes. And joining me as always is Dalton. He is our authenticator here. You can see it. It's his title.
Hello everyone, yes, I am here to authenticate things on the behalf of the Dream King, because someone's gotta do it, gosh dang it, and it might as well be me.
Well, we have in this episode 5, which many have argued is the best episode of this season. People really love the twist of it, and I remember reading it, and I forgot that it was coming. So eventually, whenever I saw the diner, I was like, oh crap, here we are. And essentially, we get to see as John D screws up things for everyone in the diner.
Well, everyone in the world. The diner is just the,
it's the focus.
It's the ground zero, because we have to translate this apocalyptic scenario into something resembling reasonable standards.
That's right. And essentially, while the world's falling apart, these 6 people are in a diner, and they fall apart on their own because essentially John D makes it so that they cannot lie. They cannot lie at all.
Up to and including lying to themselves. Which I have mixed feelings about this. But we'll get into it as we go and describe.
Yeah, well, there's not much to truly describe. Essentially, it is as I said. It does center around this waitress, and she's putting on like a shiny face because she wants good things in her life. She wants to be a writer. She wants all this and that, and we understand that. We can feel that. We've all wanted things like that.
She's a classic diner waitress. She's trying to be affable and basically kind of like everybody's mom or everybody's grandma. And there's some things lurking below the surface there,
including lesbian tendencies.
Well, see that. This is it's interesting, but again, I will withhold my commentary as yet.
Yeah, no. I mean, as I said, John D essentially is in this diner. He doesn't really order anything. He sits there and he realizes that, well, these people around, they're telling little lies.
He does get ice cream at one point.
Yes. Well, when he gets ice cream is when everybody's having their Slamtown private sessions.
Yeah.
You got the lesbians in the back, the gays, the gay in the kitchen, and then the affair in the main room. It's a thing. Did that happen in the book? I don't really care because that's what it's supposed to display.
Most of the events played out roughly similar to how they played out in the book.
Yeah, I just don't remember the cook and the husband getting it on.
I don't remember that specific part either. I also don't remember the CEO and her trophy husband from the book.
I definitely remember another couple. So I
remember Donna, and I forget her girlfriend's name this is the ironic thing, and this was one of the elements of the book that was kind of forced and was kind of, Gaiman working through some issues, but at the time it seemed like it made more sense because it was written during the Satanic Panic when evangelical, traditional conservative standards were the moral standards of the day. So it made sense to kind of stick it to the Helen Lovejoy syndrome of it all. But in the book, Bette, the waitress, she writes quote unquote happy endings for all of the diner's patrons, and that is her sort of practice or attempt to be a writer. But because of her personal biases of being a more traditional conservative type of person, she gives the lesbian couple a happy ending by writing a story in which they both wind up with dudes.
Oh, I forgot that. I forgot that. I do remember like the two of them.
Yeah.
Eventually, she falls. Well, not in love because they're just there's no love in that diner at that point.
It's a lot of gray. It's a lot of more gray area in the comic because in the comic, and this is one of the issues where I'm like, I'm split on it. Like I can see what they're going for, but I'm split on it because in the comic, John D, aka Doctor Destiny, was a literal supervillain who was doing what he was doing in order to take over the world. And while some of that included making them tell uncomfortable truths about themselves to each other and to themselves and so on, there was also the I can make these guys do anything. They're basically my puppets. I'm going to put them in all sorts of wacky situations and essentially let them destroy themselves on autopilot.
Yeah.
In
Um,
the episode though, that kind of needs to be retconned because in the show, John Dee's whole sort of raison d'etre is I'm sick of everyone lying, like on an existential scale, so no more lies, goddammit. So they have
yeah,
to
he wanders it. No more
yeah,
mutants.
yeah they have to play all of the unusual things that happen in the comic as though they are the results of people's hidden truths or inabilities to make like
I
personal illusions.
I think that there's a good. I think I saw a good portion of that when I read it years ago. Like that was one of the things. Like the guy. Another thing about it is just the idea of falling prey to sin and what one wants. I mean, in the traditional sense, because
Yeah, it's yeah,
the husband, he falls into gluttony instantly. Um, if you want, you can say that he also they all fall into lust. Um,
well,
I,
I don't even think it's necessarily going for the biblical like allegory. I think it's just going for underneath the inhibitions and the social pretenses and the masks, we all have desires that we would rather not be entirely comfortable with. And without the masks and without the illusions and without the personal filters and personal
well,
safeguards,
I mean,
where we
what I
actually
was
have
talking.
had to act on all those momentary thoughts,
Mhm.
this is what we would be. And I don't know if this is just me overly romanticizing the comic. It very well might be, but it felt a lot less cynical in the comic, um, because of the way they have to tie it all into these are what people are actually like when they're left to their own devices. I didn't actually do anything other than take away their illusions or their dreams or what have you. Um, I again, I get what they were going for, and for the streamlined version of the story they're going for, it kind of makes sense. But it's also remarkably almost nihilistic to say that we need to lie to ourselves to be good people. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that, you know, under every sane human being there's somebody waiting to basically do a purge. And that's what this episode reminded me a lot of. It reminded me a lot of the
I
purge.
I really I kind of felt that way reading the book whenever years ago too, though, that it is a very dark take that, oh, you have to lie to yourself to keep you from doing just falling into whatever. And I think
Yeah,
that that
I
does
mean,
hold true
there's
for a lot of us. I mean, how many of us have anger that just builds up to a point that you're like, you don't know what to do, and
yeah, no,
you gotta hold yourself
I
back
get
from
it.
things.
Yeah, I get it. But in the comic, the honesty inducing thing was only the first phase of these machinations, and all of it was sort of filtered through what he thinks the truth is. Whereas in the show, it's less ambiguous that he might be influencing them and more just straight up, this is what human beings are like when there is no filter and no social contract, for lack of a better word. Um, and I don't agree with that. I think if that was how human beings were without the social contract, we would never have developed a social contract, because the thing about social contract theory, this is kind of a philosophical aside, that will always never make sense to me is, in a world without the social contract, where human beings are these savage creatures, we have no incentive to create a social contract. So if you're looking at it from a purely evolutionary, purely psychological perspective, human beings have to, on some level, be good and decent inherently, because if that weren't the case, we never would have had the incentive to create a social contract in the first place.
I
Um,
I mean, if we want to go that route, I'm going to say that I think personally that when it comes to that line of theory, you have to think about the fact that at the end of the day, we're compared to animals mostly. We are, and they have their own well ways of being.
yeah,
Like
their
you go
their
ahead and you
own
take,
their own civilizations, or social structures, for lack of a better phrase.
but they lack a. I think they lack, most of them lack a source of empathy like humans do. We have a different level of intelligence compared to
Well,
them.
see,
And
but
so
that's go
with
ahead.
that, we have to use our mind to go ahead and say that we want X, Y, and Z, yes, but for the good of other people and myself, I have to deny myself this or that.
See, I
And yeah,
go ahead. I don't know if I agree with that, because I think the main difference between humans and animals is just a metric of advancement, because animals do have empathy to a degree. It's just not as crystallized as our sense of empathy. But that can be chalked up to the fact that we've had a couple extra million years down the line to get good at things. But all like our basic senses of empathy can be chalked up to the kind of social organization you see in pack animals, or in other social species like other primates. I think it's just a matter of advancement, time, and circumstance doing what advancement, time, and circumstance are going to do. But that's neither here nor there. I just I'm not sure I like everything D does being attributed to the honesty thing, because before it was, number one, the honesty being portrayed here is D's own personal warped definition of honesty in the comic, which it's less ambiguous here. Um, in the comic, also, when the honesty got boring, which it actually they kind of do in the episode as well, because eventually everyone in the diner kind of cons on to what is happening to them, and they decide not to, which I actually viewed as very optimistic, that because that's showing, no matter what the adversity is, a certain portion of humanity will eventually, um you know, as animalistic and tribal and whatnot as we are, at the end of the day, when our back is against the wall, we have our breaking point beyond which we will not go. And I think that was one of the elements of the comic that was more optimistic. Whereas here, it's again more framed as the just it. It's almost framed as though them standing up to him is not them behaving, which is weird. Whereas D in the comic was just like, okay, you're ruining my game, so I'm going to start playing with you in other ways now. Enough with the honesty thing. But
that
now that that's D's driving force, it makes something interesting and compelling and complex overly simple and kind of nihilistic. And that's a lot of the problem I have with the show is a lot of the same things are happening, but a lot of the connective tissue isn't there, and now it's sort of changing the effectiveness of the story, I guess.
well, it's actually going to come into the next conversation that we have about the show, because it is the single most well, not the single most, but it is very depressing, but there's a sense of hope in it. It's hope in good. Because ultimately, Dream does show up, and he's like, "What the hell are you doing, John D?" And
You're
he
you're
says, "Okay,
using
if
you're
we're going to
using my
fight."
power to take people's
Yeah.
dreams away from them rather than giving it to them.
Because while everybody had these dreams, they had a sense of self, of controlling oneself for their life.
Yeah, because the dreams aren't just the unfortunate lies we tell ourselves, which I will agree that that is definitely an aspect of human nature. Is we do
Yeah.
unfortunately lie to ourselves, and quite frankly, I wish we could
Yeah.
fucking stop doing that because I think civilization would be better if we did.
Well, I have to lie to
That's neither
myself.
here. But that's neither here nor there.
I have to live with the illusion that I have legs.
Uh,
It's very sad.
well,
Yeah,
I mean, you get to have that illusion. You
I get to, but it's a
you
lie.
you did well. Uh,
It's a lie to myself.
you don't get the dark irony of what you just said, do you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I womp.
Yeah, no, I didn't get that. You see, I didn't. I apologize, but I will say.
No, I'm not offended or anything. I just think it's extremely hilarious that you walk straight into that oblivious analogy.
Oh no, now you're making it a different more. Well, then I have to say,
Literally walked into it.
yeah.
Yes. But that's
I
neither
don't know.
neither here nor there. We got off track. The other thing is, um, Dream, and this will come back in a couple episodes here. One of his functions is to give people stories, which includes their sort of own personal story. You know, the old saying of everyone is a hero in their own story.
Yes.
Dream is the function of the universe that is sort of responsible for that, because at the end of the day, all stories are dreams, and all dreams are under his purview. Um, because he is slash makes them.
Yeah. No. And actually, it comes into the next point that we have, because John D is just at the end of the day, he's thrown back into his white rubber room, and that's what he has with life. Because he's cuckoo for the Cocoa Puffs.
I mean, in the comics it was Arkham. So yeah, I think if anything else, they've definitely softened the edges of John D in this show. Then again, they've softened a lot of the edges of this story to begin with, because again, this is yet another case of a lot of the dark humor and a lot of the horror elements are straight up not even approached, like they were in the comic. Because the comic was an 80s 90s punk comic, ladies and gentlemen, and it got as edgy and gruesome as you can imagine an 80s stroke 90s punk influenced comic would.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that with this next episode, I think it might be my favorite, because it is effectively the end of Volume 1, with Dream but seeing Death.
Yeah,
and Death essentially
his big sister.
Says, "Hey, what the hell? You've been around for a couple days, and now you're just sitting here
enough with the moping already.
What are you doing? Why don't you spend the day with me?"
Yeah.
So
Death has a take your younger sibling to work day, and it's very cute, as it was in the comic as well.
She's killing people all around.
Well, I mean, okay, she's not. This is the thing with Sandman's death. She's not killing people. She is the function of death, and if she isn't there, then a soul sits in its corpse for however long it takes her to get there. So, it's kind of like if you've ever seen the show Dead Like Me, which is a show that I grew up on and was one of my favorite shows as a kid. If the Reaper isn't there to reap you when your time comes, you still go through the process of dying. Your soul just lies in your own corpse and screams until the Reaper shows up to take you.
Yes. But with you get to see as Death has to take even precious little lives.
Yeah,
as
even babies.
Yeah,
because
people on their honeymoon and old people who just still don't want to go. They still want a little more time, but they don't have it.
Well, I
So
mean,
she
yeah,
takes.
she's in the comic. There was this really great line that I really wish they had put in here. Um, I'm not good or evil. I'm just me. That's one of Death's recurring lines. Actually, I'm not supposed to be good or evil. I'm just me. Um, because that is the upshot of not just Death, but all of the Endless is they're not meant to be good or evil. They're meant to be forces of nature, and unfortunately, nature is a blade with as many edges as necessary when it comes down to it. Which
Yeah,
means the elderly person dying in their sleep, she's there for, but she's also there for the baby who rolls over wrong in the crib or dies of colic or what have you. She's also there
it's
for
terribly sad. It's terribly sad, but she's not evil in any way. She's just doing what she has to. It's her job. And she says that why don't you have your own, you can find a new dream, essentially to dream. You can find a new project, a new thing. I mean, am I wrong? That's essentially what she says.
no,
So go find
yeah,
yourself.
no, it's a very sisterly, like, basically
Hmm.
buck up,
And
bro, pretty much.
and she goes ahead and reminds him about an old friend, and that's where the rest of this episode it kind of takes place through a different time.
Yeah,
I just want to go ahead and say, Bianca Zombie, aloha to you. Got to get a puppet for his channel. There you go, or her channel. But here we have this definitely a new dual review. Yeah, we did She-Hulk earlier today, and this now. And that doesn't sound pleasant, keeping your soul in your body. No,
yeah,
no, I
yeah,
don't
no.
imagine.
Death definitely, and again, it's the thing with all of the Endless. As fucked up as some of the implications of the Endless might be, as horrifying as it may be that some people are driven to suicide by nightmares or by insomnia or what have you, um, it would be worse if Dream wasn't there. And
Yeah.
as idyllic as a world without death sounds, um, not so much.
Yeah.
If
Um,
she's not there to do it, the thing that makes you die still happens. You just don't have the peace of actually dying as a result of it.
yeah. Well, essentially, we get to go to the year. What is it? Like the 1500s?
1389 is the first time skip, and this is something I mentioned to Puppetine before we came on. Um, Number one, this is one of the few episodes of the Sandman that adapts two issues, not just one, because neither issue or neither story in the issue could sustain probably a full episode on its own. And the issues that they're adapting here are Sound of Her Wings, which is where the episode gets its name from, which is the thing where Sissy takes her brother to work day. Um, and then there's another issue, which is honestly one of my all-time favorites of the entire 75 issue run, which is called Men of Good Fortune, which is the story of how Dream and Death make a bet because there is a man named Hop Gatling who basically thinks to himself, you everyone who dies is just a moron because you're essentially just doing it because everyone else is doing it. I'm going to actively choose not to do it. And of course, if Death weren't standing right there to hear him say this, he probably would have died normally anyway. But because Death happens to be in the tavern with Dream and they hear this, they both kind of have a chuckle about it. But Death thinks to herself, you know what? No, I'm gonna let this one. I'm gonna let this one stand. And you, brother, are going to come back here every 100 years to basically do a checkup on this guy to make sure he still wants to live. And
Because Dream
only
doesn't
when
really have any kind of anchor towards humans.
no, and
Like he does his
and
duty, but it's still not. It's nothing
he
personal
doesn't
to
he
him.
doesn't like he doesn't like humanity. He likes like or maybe that's not even true. Like he likes humanity, I think, as a whole, but he doesn't care for any particular humans. And effectively, what this amounts to is Death. going on a roundabout way to basically set up a play date for her brother every
Get him
100
a
years.
friend.
Yeah.
Here's a pal.
And it is very much framed that way in the comic as well, especially later on when but I think at one point in the later issues, it's been a while since I've revisited the later issues because the ending of as great as the Sandman series is, the ending is terrible. But in the later issues, unless I'm mistaken, Dream literally straight up asks her, why did you let Hob off the hook? Why give this to him in the first place?" And she just responds, "Because you needed a friend," basically. Um, so she was playing the smarter big sister reverse psychology thing on him, where it's like, oh, I'll make a bet with Dream, and that will make sure that Dream has a friend every couple 100 years.
Yeah, so we see as time passes, he says, "Okay, I'll tell him." He goes to the table and says, "Well, you say you're not going to die. Well, let's make a deal. Well, I will meet you here in this tavern in 100 years." And he keeps it. He's having a
Yeah,
good life. He's doing well. He's wealthy, or he's doing okay at least. And
yeah,
well, he Dream asks, "So do you still want to live?" And he's like, "Yes." And so the next 100 years, he has a
yeah.
wife. He has a
His,
kid. Uh, and it's looking like it's getting better. And then the next year, it all falls apart. They try to
yeah.
kill him as a witch.
See,
His wife
see,
and kids all
this is a
died.
this is a part of Men of Good Fortune that I absolutely love, because on the surface you could read it as a very superficial history progressive sort of thing, like it gets better over time and so on and so forth. But because of the transition between the Elizabethan era, where Elizabethan England was a golden age basically. Well, anyone who knows anything about history knows that the Elizabethan period was immediately followed by the Jacobite period, which included the reign of King James, who was a demonology spouting, witch hating son of a bitch, and begat the what we refer to historically as the Burning Times. And it was a very nice thing that was included for me as both a mythology fan, a history nut, and a comic book fan just in general, because it basically acts. I don't even know if Neil Gaiman was smart enough to realize this is what he was doing, but it basically acts as a one issue refutation of history necessarily must move forward and progress. Because if that be the case, then why the hell was the idyllic Elizabethan Golden Age followed by all the witch burnings?
Because essentially times will go, like, even at that point, he says all of that, and Dream is sure that he is done.
Yeah,
That he has won.
he's looking at him like this has to be the time. He's hated every second of the last 80 years, according to him. His family died, his son
Yep.
died. He lost all his land, all his wealth, he's literally living as a hobo to the point they won't even let him in the tavern when Dream shows up. And Dream
Yep.
literally has to intercede and go, "No, no, he's fine. He's my guest. Leave him alone." Um,
So essentially, Dream asks, "So, do you want to die?" And well, you get to see Hobbes. He says, "Are you kidding?"
yeah, no, death is a mug's game. That's the line he keeps coming back to,
Yep.
and it's also
I
it's
have
also
so
the
much
line
to
in the
live
comics.
for.
Is yeah,
Yeah.
death is a mug's game, meaning only idiots would seek death. Is basically what Hobbes' like motto is. So
The next year,
even as he's suffering horribly and everything around him has come crashing down, he's like, "Are you fucking high, mate?" Or no, in the comic, the line was even better because it was like, apparently when Hobgoblin gets insanely drunk, he defaults back to like the old timey way of speaking, because he goes, "Art thou addle pated? Death is a mug's game."
yeah. But with that, with what we get to see after that, like, Dream goes ahead and starts kind of interceding, because you get to see as the next time he sees him, he's doing good. He is in a new line of work. He's shipping, and he's shipping slaves. It's not a good thing, not at all. And Death says, "Listen, to
Dream,
enslave another man is a terrible thing. And Hob goes ahead and says, but it's work. And Dream says, let me put it in a way that you can understand. And essentially directs him to saying, you are offered this freedom to live. Would it be right for you
why
to
would
take
you
it
take that
away?
away from another? Yeah.
Yeah. And so at that point, he's like, he understands. He says, I'll take it. And he does. And they meet Joanna Constantine.
I think they might have belabored the point a little bit too much. I didn't it didn't hit as nicely as it did in the comic because all Dream says in the comic is and it's as a parting word after they deal with Lady Joanna. Robert Gadline, it is a poor thing to enslave another. I would suggest you find yourself a different line of business.
Oh, I
Um,
thought that was before the Joanna. I thought Joanna was the next 100 years,
no,
but I
no,
could be.
in the show it is. I'm making comparisons with the comic again because again,
Oh, okay,
it
it's mixed.
what I was saying was I think this is because ye old cynical writers in the modern era went, apparently people don't understand this, so we have to belabor the point. But in the comic, when Neil Gaiman was young and hungry and had everything to prove and everything to gain, he was a lot smarter about handling this because it wasn't because
Huh.
the other
I
thing
thought it
is
came across well for me.
it, I mean it's not terrible. I like that it was sort of it was still impactful because very rarely does Dream say anything in the comic that isn't somewhat impactful, but it wasn't a moral judgment. And I think that's another aspect of the show that I'm not liking as much because again, in you know the recurring line of death that also applies to the rest of her family is I'm not good or evil. It's not my
Yeah.
job to judge morality or morals. My job is to be a force of nature. But Dream still mentions to his friend in the comic, it's literally sort of a Hob, you might want to find another line of business because it's a poor thing to enslave another. God damn it!
Yeah.
It's not quite as moralistic or ham-fisted in the comic, and I liked that better because number one, the endless aren't supposed to be moral or immoral. They're supposed to be nature. And two, um, it's it relies upon the intelligence of the reader more than I think the show relies on the intelligence of the viewer. Like that in the comic, it was sort of a. Of course, I'm not going to belabor this point because that's all I need to say. I think in his old age, Neil Gaiman got more cynical because the political spectrum is doing things he doesn't like, don't you know? And so he felt like he needed to belabor the point. And I think the scene is poorer for it because it's a lot more not only dramatic and not only compelling, but also a lot more organic in the comic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can understand feeling that way. I just think it did hit well for me. The next thing is
I mean,
pretty
it's a
much
small thing.
right.
You probably wouldn't notice it unless you've read the comic.
I didn't get
But
to that point. So
you haven't gotten to that point in the story yet.
the
But
the
I'm
next
just
part.
saying for those that might watch the Sandman Netflix series and go, it wasn't as polished as I wanted it to be. Read the comic. The comic is much more polished and is much more full of life. I guess is the best way of putting it.
Yeah. But I'm going to go ahead and say that past to the next 100 years after Joanna Constantine, um, after she wants to basically make a deal with the Endless, so that way.
Constantine being a
Constantine.
Constantine is what's going on there. Yeah, the
Um,
Constantine family are a bunch of scoundrels, and Dream even mentions like I how does he phrase it? Their their kind are the sort that wander the world friendless and alone among all the people they must sacrifice until finally they in turn make the final sacrifice or something to that effect. I don't remember the exact phrasing. Which is basically Constantine gonna Constantine line. Um, I I also missed a minor thing in this part too because not only does the Constantine family mannerisms carry on to Lady Joanna in the comic, Hobb also mentions that he knew a Jack Constantine once who also had dealings with the supernatural, um, and came to him for knowledge in the Elizabethan period, which was cool.
But I'm going to go ahead and get to truly my almost my favorite part. After this, it's you get to see Dream as he's entering the tavern, and there's this. Would you use the word unsurly? I don't know. A woman of a
Ill
specific
repute,
career.
a woman of ill repute, what
Yes.
Benjamin Franklin called low women, and what Aleister Crowley called scarlet women. Let's just
So
put it
with
that way.
yeah, no, meets her, and she essentially wants to make a deal, not that kind of deal, a transaction.
It's the Victorian era. It's like 1890s, and Dream comes across the prostitute, and the
Yeah.
first thing she says to him is, um,
So
the
let's
first
not
thing
say
she
it here. Let's
the
not say
first thing she says to him is, "Oh, I'm so glad it's you and not Jack the Ripper," basically.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Okay, yes.
I
You don't
I
need to
thought
say
you
the
were
next line. Ooh,
I thought you were bloody Jack himself, and then of course she starts applying her trade with Dream, and Dream is just having none of it.
nope. And so she gets angry, but you get to see as Hobbs says, "Go get yourself a drink," and essentially he jokes about her, but that's when Dream says basically her true name and
Yes,
where she came from and the
her
hardships
backstory.
she's had, and that's when Hobbs starts to feel bad,
Yeah,
and they have a
Hob jokingly inquires of nobody knows anything about her, but of course Dream knows everyone because everyone has dreams, and so he basically has a mental inventory of every single human, um, and or can see their dreams just by looking at them. And yeah, it turns out that La Lu, the London prostitute in the 1890s, um, she did not have it the best growing up, shall we say. There's a reason why she is in the line of work she is in, and it's not nice.
yeah. So essentially, after this, uh, he Hobbs says that Dream. He thinks the reason why Dream does this, he doesn't seem to have a lot of presence other than this. So he thinks that perchance, because he doesn't even know his name, uh, that maybe he's there because he needs a friend. And Dream takes great offense to this. You dare? You dare? And he says, fine, I will show you. I will not be here. You can wait. And so Hobbs realizes what he's done and he runs after him, but it's
Yeah,
already too late.
Hob insinuates that Dream needs a friend, and Dream is put out in a very like aristocratic fashion of like I am a force of nature. Do you really think I would be friends with a human, basically? And and they have a fight. And in the show's timeline, Dream was bound. Um, Dream was bound in 1989. Um, which is when they would have next met. So when Hobb goes for the meeting in 1989, like he normally would, Dream is still locked away in Roderick Burgess's circle in the like little crystal cell there. So he thinks essentially, oh, this is a result of me getting fresh. Well, damn.
Yeah.
Even though it was mostly because Dream was indisposed
Yeah.
for a century or so.
Yep. And so after this, it's 100 years later, and he's alone. he's admitting that somebody is he was supposed to meet somebody
Well,
in
more like 50 years, because or are you talking about in 1989?
89. I'm talking
Okay,
about then.
yeah.
Yeah, because he was supposed to meet him. He was waiting, and then he learns that the tavern is closing, and he thinks that maybe his friendship is at an end. But that's when we learn it's not 100 years later; it's about 50. And Dream is out. He is not locked away anymore. He goes and he sees that the tavern is closed, but he notices a marking of graffiti on the wall that says "The New Inn." So he goes ahead and just goes over. And who is running this inn? It's
Yeah,
Hod.
well,
It
I don't know if he's running it. I think the way it looked to me is that's just where he prefers to get like his like drinks and stuff. It didn't seem like he was running it. It seemed like he was a customer. But I might be wrong. I might have missed something.
No, I mean, Rhaegar, you are correct. It's a little on the nose, but it's a good way to set the time because what else are you going to talk about then? Uh, but yeah, no, this is really a good way to end it. I mean, you do have the stuff with desire, um, and
Yeah,
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 right.
yeah. Desire, as it turns out, which this shouldn't surprise anyone for fans of the comic, but yeah, Dream and Desire do not like each other at all. And here's the other thing about Desire. In the same way that you would think Death is a brooding character, but is in actuality a kind of a very like nurturing and sympathetic and almost like nurse-like character. You would think in like not really thinking about it that Desire would be a very like happy, very giving person or entity, but no, because here's the thing: desires that are fulfilled disappear,
Hmm.
which means that desire can no longer control someone when their desire has been fulfilled. So in Desire's mind, because desire is a controlling little shit of a concept, um, it would prefer it would prefer if everyone was in a constant state of agony, constantly desiring things and never being fulfilled, because the longer a desire goes unfulfilled, the stronger it gets, and thereby the more control desire has over them. Um, the reason why desire doesn't like dream is because dream can mean motivation or ambition, i.e., a dream you want to pursue or a dream you wish would come true or something along those lines. And because there is that gray area between dreams and desires, dreams as ambition and desires as, desires, um, dream if he so chooses can just take anything from desire and go, that's nice, that's mine now, because it's not a desire that's motivating this person anymore, this thing anymore. It's a dream that's motivating this person now. And because
Like
dream is
everybody else, I've got a dream.
yeah, and because dream is the older sibling, that also means he's stronger. And desire hates that dream can fuck with desire shit.
Yeah.
So Desire has a long-standing grudge against their older brother.
Yes. Um, and essentially that's going to come into play within the next episodes. We only have 2 weeks of this left, and then we have something special after. But only 2 weeks of this left. But I think this is the highlight. I don't know if it can really get better after this. This is like my favorite episode.
I
Like it
mean,
has.
they had it extremely easy because especially adapting these two issues together in one episode, Sound of Her Wings and Men of Good Fortune are two of the best issues of the entire 75 issue run. So they would have had to screw something up, but mightily to screw up Sound of
Yeah.
Her Wings and Men of Good Fortune together. Like that, you have two of the best issues of the entire run to adapt. Unless you are a complete asshole, this is going to
Yep.
be one of the best episodes, and it was.
But it was, and I'm truly glad that we got to talk about it. Right now, I am really liking this series. understand that some of the things are they have a difference to them, but I am able to enjoy this. There's a lot there for it, but now it's just a question of where do we go from here, and I'm just worried that, like the first volume, it ends on a high note. But for this, we aren't at the end yet. We have 4 more episodes to go.
Yeah, because the season is adapting both Preludes and Nocturnes, which is the first 8 issues, and then the
The House.
then the Doll's House, which is issues 8 to 16, I do believe.
I'm going to
So
do a read through before our review.
yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the Doll's House, as like I mean I love most parts of the Sandman because it is one of the greatest comics ever written in my opinion, and probably my favorite comic ever written. But that being said, it has its peaks and it has its troughs, and there are moments in Doll's House that I like, but I could have done without a lot of it. Um, so that's where I stand on Doll's House. It's not that it's bad because apart from the ending, because the ending is terrible. But apart from the ending, there are no bad Sandman stories. But as to where I would rank Doll's House in terms of the 10 other volumes of the series, it's towards the bottom, just above Game of You is where I rank Doll's House.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to wait and see how I feel. But that's it for us this week. Please make sure to leave your thoughts down below. Let me go ahead. MK is asking, do you think there will be a season 2 of The Sandman?
See, I don't know because it debuted at number 1 on Netflix's charts, but it didn't stay there. And Sandman was pretty damn expensive by Netflix's standards as a show, so I don't know. I mean,
Well, they aren't being run by David Zaslav or yeah.
Netflix isn't. No.
Exactly, that's my point. So there's a good chance that good things can survive.
I mean maybe. I'm not I'm I mean I'm not sure where they're gonna go with season 2 because I had thought they were gonna go two volumes per season, but the last episode of season 2 or season 1 here takes out most of Dream Country, so I guess they're going right into Season of Mist for season 2, which I suppose is fine. Um, I don't want it to get a season 3 then, if that's the case, because assuming that they still adapt like 2 volumes per season, then that means
You're getting scarily close to something you don't
they're
want.
getting scarily close to they're getting scarily close to some of the uh, latter volumes because they seem to just throw the one-off um, issues into episodes alongside the more plot-oriented stuff.
Makes sense.
So if they, which makes sense for a show, I'm just saying if they continue to do that and just throw um, the one-offs alongside the plot-oriented stuff, then that means that they're going to speed right through a lot of the better volumes that are just one-off stories and get into the darker the ending, which is the worst part of Sandman. So I don't it can get a season 2 just because I want to see what they do with it. I'm not sure I want to let them have a season 3 though, if that's how they're gonna play it, because I don't like the ending is the worst part of Sandman because it is the least organic part of Sandman. It is the most Neil Gaiman asserting his authority as the author part of Sandman, and
That's sad.
Neil, you should have learned your own lesson. A large part of the theme of Sandman was stories are above the authors that make them. They come from, whether it's intuition, whether it's independent spontaneous invention, whether it's the divine, whether it's whatever, stories outrank their authors. And you should have learned your own freaking lesson, Neil, but you didn't. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see. Make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below if you're watching after. Make sure to like and subscribe. We're going to finish up the Sandman season 1, and we hope you stick around with us. And make sure that you stick around for other things on the channel. But until then, we want to thank you so much for watching and say bye.
Cheers, guys.
Dream a little dream
Dream
of
of me.
no, dream it of dream.